Hey everybody, and welcome back to our New Testament in a Year Bible reading plan. I'm Pastor John, and today we're talking about Matthew 24. So Matthew 23, Jesus kind of got in a scuffle with the Pharisees, and he ended up pronouncing this woe over Jerusalem. He's crying over Jerusalem, saying, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you kill the prophets, you don't accept the Lord's will and the Lord's way, and I want to protect you, but you wouldn't have it." And so right after he pronounces that is this story in Matthew 24 that we're reading. Verse 1. As Jesus was leaving the temple grounds, his disciples pointed out to him the various temple buildings. But he responded, "Do you see all these buildings? I tell you the truth. They will be completely demolished. Not one stone will be left on top of another." Later, Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives. His disciples came to him privately and said, "Tell us, when will all this happen? What sign will signal your return and the end of the world?" So we're going to pause here. This is usually known as the eschatological discourse, which just means a talk about the end times. And it includes end times things, but it's not all about the end times as we have sometimes come to know it. You see, there are kind of two theological camps when it comes to understanding this. Some put everything all in the future, and some actually put everything that Jesus says all in the past. Where we have to be is kind of in the middle. Because if everything's in the future, it didn't really mean anything to his disciples right there. And if everything's all in the past, well, then it doesn't really mean anything to us. It's just kind of what happened. So we land somewhere in the middle. Now, what question is Jesus answering? He said, every stone in the temple is going to be toppled. And the disciples are asking, when will this take place? And when will be your return and the end of the world? What for them means his return? They don't understand that Jesus is even going to be dead and resurrected. So what does his coming mean? The coming is actually the better translation of the word. Jesus' coming is not in their minds necessarily the 2,000 years or that we've experienced and then Jesus comes. For them, they're asking, when will you be enthroned, Jesus? And that answer is actually kind of complicated because he's actually already enthroned in heaven, but also we're in the process, and in the future, it will be completely new heaven, new earth, and he will be enthroned over all creation. So this is a process. It's, as Hebrews says, that things are being brought under his feet. Let's read on, and maybe we can get a little clue. So verse 4, Jesus told them, "Don't let anyone mislead you, for many will come in my name, claiming I'm the Messiah. They'll deceive many, and you'll hear of wars and threats of wars, but don't panic. Yes, these things must take place, but the end won't follow immediately. Nation will go to war against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in many parts of the world, but all this is only the first of the birth pains, with more to come. Then you will be arrested, persecuted, and killed. You'll be hated all over the world because you are my followers. And many will turn away from me and betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and will deceive many people. Sin will be rampant everywhere, and the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. And the good news about the kingdom will be preached throughout the whole world, so that all nations will hear it, and then the end will come." The day is coming when you will see what Daniel the prophet spoke about, the sacrilegious object that causes desecration standing in the holy place. And there's a parenthesis here. Reader, pay attention. Okay, so all of the things that Jesus just said are an answer to the question, when is it going to take place that these things, that the temple topples over and not one stone stands upon another? See, we kind of hear about wars and rumors of wars and threats and earthquakes, and we go, oh, the end's coming. Well, yes, that is a reality. But Jesus is actually talking about a specific thing that happened 40 years after he's saying this. We have to understand the timeline, that Jesus dies around 30 AD, and about 40 years later, in AD 70, then Jerusalem is ransacked by Rome and the temple is destroyed. And Jesus is proclaiming that what happens is actually God's judgment. Now, what is this clue? There's a clue in this. The day is coming when you will see what Daniel the prophet spoke about, the sacrilegious object that causes desecration. In your translation, it might say the abomination of desolation. What is he referring to? In Daniel's referring to Antiochus Epiphanes, who was he was an emperor who was kind of combating. I think he was the Seleucid emperor, and he was actually had territory in Judea at the time. And he was trying to wage war, and he didn't really win a war. And he blamed the Jewish people because they wouldn't worship the Greek gods. And so he goes into the temple, sacrifices a bull to Zeus on the Jewish altar. And this was an abomination of desolation. And because it desecrated, it desacredized, or it made the temple impure and gross. And so there had to be a restoration of the temple and all this kind of thing. Jesus is referring to that because he's saying soon there's going to be an evil ruler standing in the temple. 40 years later, this happens. The ruler Titus comes in and he actually destroys Jerusalem, goes right into the temple, tears it all up, tears it all apart. And you can even go look in Rome today at the Arch of Titus, and there's a picture of them taking the menorah out of Israel as one of his victories. This happened, and Jesus prophesied it 40 years before it happened. And so Jesus is saying, when you see them coming, and you hear, and what happened, the reason that Titus came and it was so bad is because the Jews rose up in revolt. And Jesus is warning them. He says, when you see this coming, then those in Judea must flee to the hills. A person out on the deck of a roof must not go down into the house to pack. A person out in the field must not even return to get a coat. How terrible it would be for pregnant women and for nursing mothers in those days. And pray that your flight will not be in the winter or on the Sabbath, for there will be greater anguish than at any time since the world began, and it will never be so great again. In fact, unless that time of calamity is shortened, not a single person would survive, but it will be shortened for the sake of God's chosen ones. And we know that at the time it was just horrid violence. There were sieges and people were eating their infant children, and it was just horrible massacre and horror. But we know historically, interestingly, this actually happened where the Christians saw ahead of time. They saw these things brewing, and the church that was in Jerusalem actually fled. We see it historically that it happened. So how did they know to do that? Because of what Jesus said here. Verse 23, then if anyone tells you, look, here is the Messiah, or there he is, don't believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will rise up and perform great signs and wonders so as to deceive, if possible, even God's chosen ones. See, I've warned you about this ahead of time. So if someone tells you, look, the Messiah's out in the desert, don't bother to go and look. Or look, he's hiding here, don't believe it. Listen to this. For as the lightning flashes in the east and shines to the west, so it will be when the Son of Man comes. Just as the gathering of vultures shows there is a carcass nearby, so these signs indicate that the end is near. So pause here. We see that this language is kind of mixed. So there's some of this that's specifically talking about the temple, but there were two questions asked. When will the temple be destroyed? And what will signal your return and the end of the world? What will signal your coming and the end of the world? These questions are mixed, so the answers are kind of like mixed up here. And it's not exactly clear. Like we know, we can kind of look back and see that some of it's here and some of it's there, but we're having to figure all this out. So Jesus says, don't worry about people who say, there's a Messiah, there's a prophet, there's this. We have to be careful because he says, when the Son of Man comes, everyone's going to see it. Just like everyone, when you're outside, you can see lightning. everyone's going to see Jesus coming. You don't have to wonder. And that's kind of the theme of what he's saying. When Jesus returns, everybody's going to know. So we don't have to listen to these people who are like kind of warning us, oh, he's about to come. Oh, it looks like he's coming here. I did the math. All this stuff. No, Jesus is coming. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but we'll really harp on that in just a minute. And then he says, verse 29, immediately after the anguish of these days. It's not so much immediately in the Greek, but it is basically quickly, soon. After the anguish of those days, listen to this. The sun will be darkened, the moon will give no light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. And then at last the sign that the Son of Man is coming will appear in the heavens, and there will be deep mourning among all the peoples of the earth, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send out his angels with the mighty blast of a trumpet, and they will gather his chosen ones from all over the world, from the farthest ends of the earth and heaven. All right, so here's the thing, is all of that probably, like from our vantage point, 2,000 years later, all of that sounds like, oh, end times, there will be signs in the heavens. But some of this sounds a lot like what happened at the crucifixion. Notice that in a couple chapters, it says the sun will be darkened. That happened at the crucifixion. The moon will give no light. Remember, there was an eclipse. That happened at the crucifixion. Stars will fall from the sky. Well, the stars didn't fall, but, there are demon powers that fell. The stars, and remember, and angels are in one and the same. And the powers in the heavens will be shaken. All of that happened. And so we have to see that Jesus' crucifixion is the sign that this stuff is shifting, and that things, like from then on, we can even see, it says that the Son of Man will send out his messengers, his angels, with mighty blast of a trumpet, and they will gather his chosen ones from all over the world. Now, that's going to happen at the end when he comes in fullness, but it's also sort of happening right now. That's what me preaching is about. I'm gathering his chosen ones to him. And so we kind of see that, and the Son of Man coming, actually, when you understand the prophecy that happens in Daniel, where it says the Son of Man, because it's actually from a prophecy in Daniel. If you go read in Daniel 9, when it says the Son of Man came on the clouds of heaven, it's not about Jesus descending from heaven. It's about the Son of Man ascending to heaven. And that kind of gives us a clue. So Jesus' death, burial, resurrection, ascension, and enthronement are actually the beginning of these last days and the start of the whole process of bringing everything to the close. And that's what he's talking about. Verse 32. Now learn a lesson from the fig tree. When its branches bud and its leaves begin to sprout, you know that summer is near. In the same way, when you see all these things, you can know his return is very near, right at the door. I tell you the truth, this generation will not pass from the scene until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will disappear, but my words will never disappear. Okay, so he just said, all these things, this generation will not pass from the scene. So there's different interpretations, because if we lump it all into the future, this generation has to mean something metaphorical. It means, maybe he means the church, maybe he means this teaching or something. No, it seems literally Jesus means, hey, some of you guys, you guys will not pass away until this stuff happens. I mean, some of them did, and some of the disciples even did, but not all of them. They lived that generation saw what Jesus is talking about. And he's saying these things, what are these things? The temple falling, the abomination of desolation, people being taken in judgment, all of these things, horrible, horrible stuff. He said, this generation will not pass away until he sees these things. Listen to the next verse. However, no one knows that day, the day or hour when these things will happen. So there's actually a shift in the term, and it kind of doesn't catch it in the New Living Translation. I think it's the New King James, however, of that day, no one knows the day or the hour, not even the angels in heaven or the Son himself, only the Father knows. So there's a shift from these things that happens with the temple to that day where the Son of Man returns in all of his glory. And Jesus charts that nobody knows that one. Everyone will see it, but nobody knows it. Don't listen when people are saying, oh, here it is, there's that. No one knows, only the Father. Verse 37, when the Son of Man returns, it will be like in the Noah's day. In those days before the flood, the people were enjoying banquets and parties and weddings right up to the time Noah entered his boat. People didn't realize what was going to happen until the flood came and swept them all away. That is the way it will be when the Son of Man comes. 2 men will be working together in the field. One will be taken, the other left. 2 women will be grinding flour at the mill. One will be taken, the other left. So you too must keep watch, for you don't know what day your Lord is coming. Understand this, if a homeowner knew exactly when a burglar was coming, he would keep watch and not permit his house to be broken into. You also must be ready all the time, for the Son of Man will come when least expected. So, time out here again. So when the Son of Man returns, it'll be like in the days of Noah. How was it in the days of Noah? The flood came. People were making business plans, getting ready, getting married, basically planning out their lives. Then judgment came. That's what he's saying when the Son of Man's return will be like. That he'll come back, one will be taken in judgment and another will be left. And one will be taken in judgment and another will be left. And it's just going to happen like that. And no one's going to know, because the robber, say you knew someone was coming to your house tonight to rob, you'd be on the front porch with a gun. But Jesus is not saying that. He is saying that we don't know the time or the place. He's coming like a thief in the night. There is no warning. And so how do I know that this is talking about something different than the temple and everything? Because he says, go back to verse 32. He says there was a lesson from the fig tree that when the branches start to bud, you know summer is near. In the same way, when you see all these things, you can know his return is very near. Then he says, however, that hour no one knows. So which is it? We can know it's very near, or that hour. That's why I'm saying is like there's some of these things that were for then, and there's some of these things that are for the future. And the things that are for the future, no one knows. But the things that were for then, in 70 AD, you could kind of sense it coming. And because we know that he correctly, and this is kind of how prophecy works, we know that Jesus he gave a sign. The temple, one, his death, burial, and resurrection, and then the temple being destroyed was the sign that he will come again. So we can bank on the fact that he's going to come again because that happened when he said it was going to happen. So praise God. Finally, verse 45, This is how we are to respond to all of what I've just said and all of what Jesus has just said. A faithful, sensible servant is one to whom the master can give the responsibility of managing his other household servants and feeding them. If the master returns and finds that the servant has done a good job, there will be a reward. I tell you the truth, the master will put that servant in charge of all he owns. But what if the servant is evil and thinks my master won't be back for a while, and begins beating the other servants, partying and getting drunk? The master will return unannounced and unexpected, and he will cut the servant to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So, what happens if we who have been given charge over the house aren't ready all the time, and we start to party and use the master's things and then beat his other servants and don't follow the way of the gospel? Well, we will end up like the sinners in judgment. that we, and that's the hard thing Jesus is saying is, and we'll talk about in the next two parables, that we have to always be prepared for his coming. We don't know when it's going to happen. We're not given privy to, we're not given privy to that information. Not even the angels are. Not even the Son is. Only the Father. And so what we have to do is stay faithful, 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 and be ready all the time, because we never know when. But if we don't, then we will fall into what the world falls into, and we don't want part of that judgment. Lord, help us always be ready. Help us discern the signs of our own times. Help us see where we are in this whole thing and live faithfully to your gospel and your good news, and always be prepared for your coming. We may never know the hour or the day or the time, but we know this, that we can be considered faithful and those who have endured and your chosen ones. I thank you, Lord, for it. Thank you for gathering us up into you. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. If you enjoyed this, please like and share. And just want to say we love you. We're excited, always to be doing this. And so thank you so much for watching. Have a good one. Bye-bye.